From Prevention to Recovery with Marcel Gemme.
Welcome to From Prevention to Recovery. I'm your host, Marcel Gemme, and today I'm honored to introduce a true hero in the fight against substance use disorder. Jen Rader is a force of nature who has dedicated her life to public service and saving lives. As West Virginia's first female fire chief, she made history in Huntington in 2017, but her impact extends far beyond breaking barriers. Jen became a national and international figure through the Oscar-nominated Netflix documentary Heroin with an E, which showcased her compassionate, innovative approach to the opioid crisis that devastated a community. During her 27 years with the Huntington Fire Department, Jen didn't just respond to overdoses. She completely changed how first responders approach addiction, treating each person with dignity, empathy, and understanding. In 2018, Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world, and she's been recognized by everyone from Senator Joe Manchin to First Lady Melania Trump. But what makes Jen truly remarkable isn't the awards. It's her heart. She's saved countless lives with her own hands and changed countless more through her powerful advocacy for removing the stigma around addiction. Jen, thank you for being here. It's truly an honor to have you on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
Now, I'd like to start at the beginning. What originally drew you into public health? And did you ever imagine it would lead you into the center of the opioid crisis?
Very good question. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that anything like has transpired would. I was actually working in the jewelry business for about 8 years, and I was assistant manager of a jewelry store in the D.C. area, Washington, D.C. area. And a lady happened to have go into cardiac arrest in the doorway of the jewelry store. And I felt helpless. I didn't know CPR, so I called 911 and I stayed on the line, and the fire department showed up. And in the meantime, some people had stopped and were doing CPR on the lady. And this was probably in like 1993. And when the fire department showed up, there was a woman firefighter. And at that time, I didn't even know that was a choice. So they were able to get back a normal sinus rhythm. They used the paddles and shocked her and everything. And I just thought, I don't want to ever feel that helpless again. And I was a big runner at the time, and a lot of the guys that I jogged with in my apartment complex were firefighters. So I started talking to them about the profession. And so I applied for the Fairfax County Fire and Rescue over there. And then my brother called me and said, "Hey, they're giving the test back here. Won't you take the test back in Huntington?" And so I did, because I'm from this area. And so I ended up being hired on the Huntington Fire Department, and then took a paramedic class, and, so on and so on. But, never dreamed that we would be witness here in Appalachia to the, one of the worst crises of our, generation, or probably in a century. It's a public health crisis. It's an epidemic, and it continues, and it's probably going to be another 50 years before we come out on the other side.
Yeah, no, I understand totally. So now Huntington was labeled the Overdose Capital of America, yet you've been upfront about the issue rather than hiding the problem. Why is that transparency so critical, and how did it help your community begin to heal?
So I think that we got labeled the center of the epidemic, or ground zero, just because we were willing to talk about the problem. We weren't trying to hide it. And At that time, our mayor was Steve Williams, and he was he's a very brave man. And even as a politician, he's like, look, I have to name our problems before I can find ways to deal with them. And so he was very outspoken about it. He took a chance. I remember when I was a captain on the fire department, he knew I was also a nurse. I had gone to nursing school after completing paramedic um, courses, and that was later in life too. But his parents were getting older, and he had been to the one of the local emergency rooms in the middle of the night with his parents, and I was there as a nurse. So he knew he had a firefighter that was also a nurse, and seeing this unfold from two different angles. So he decided to put together an Office of Drug Control Policy on a small city level. We're a town of 46,000 people. And we didn't really know what we were going to do. He said, just go out and figure out what we can do to make a difference. I know you all will figure out. And it was myself, and it was a retired police chief, and it was the crime analyst for our police department. And we started going out and talking to the people on the front lines and asking their opinions, and gathering information about what they were seeing, and how we could tackle this. And a couple things were glaring at first. One, not a lot of people were working together on the problem. They all knew it was happening, but nobody was like working together on it. So we fixed that. We put people in the same room, different agencies, partners. The other thing that was really difficult for us is to see exactly how bad it was, because the data on overdoses and overdose deaths takes 2 years to vet. So we developed a way of keeping unvetted data in our local jurisdiction, and that gave us a starting point. We basically became facilitators and in making positive change and developing programs that did not exist at the time. And we started the first harm reduction program in the state of West Virginia. We had to have legislators change some state laws to even do that at the beginning. And we had that syringe exchange and harm reduction for 10 years. It just politically went away, unfortunately. But we had it for 10 years, and there were other syringe exchange programs in the state for some time. We might have one or two left, but they're politically they're trying to be phased out. So I think it was the right move at the right time, and we were just not afraid of failure. We obviously learn more from our failures than we do our successes, and trial and error, and we share those lessons that we learned with other areas of the country, because if we can save you some time and money in figuring out what works for your community, we're happy to share.
No, absolutely. And you're right, like it has to be not just one person or one department. When you're fighting something like that, it's a team effort and on different levels, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when things began escalating in your county, what were the first moments where you realized that this was something far bigger than what any community has faced before?
So, right away, when Mayor Williams put us all together, that was the fall of 2014. And, overdoses were out of control at that point. And we knew it was going to get worse before it got better, because everything you try to do to combat what you're dealing with, it takes time to build programs. It takes time to get the education out there. So we knew it was escalating, and we did a lot of research to figure out what happened here and what were the causes to make it change. Um, so, we have a lot of knowledge uh, on the subject,
Good.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So with your background as both a nurse and paramedic, you brought a unique perspective to firefighting. How did your medical training influence the way you approach overdose responses differently than traditional approaches?
Well, I went to nursing school at age 40. I am older than I look. When I went to nursing school, they really didn't talk a lot about addiction or substance use disorder. And then I immediately started working in an emergency room that, like pretty much within a couple days of graduating from nursing school on my days off from the fire department. And a lot of people had no patience and were frustrated by the actions and the manipulation of those suffering from substance use disorder, those coming in that had overdosed. And I was told, by more than one person, just run them off. I mean, we don't want to deal with them. They're just drug seeking. And I saw the treatment that people were given, and I thought, you know what, I'm not okay with that, and I don't understand what's going on, and I don't understand what they're dealing with, but I want to learn. And so I started doing research, but what I learned mostly was from my patients. I started taking 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and talking to them, not just going in, doing my job and leaving. Like, look, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm not trying to be mean, but I want to understand how you got to where you are. And I need to understand what I do that makes your situation worse and what can I do to make your situation better. And it made me a better first responder and it made me a better nurse. My clients taught me, my patients taught me uh, how to be a better person. And it all just stemmed from the fact that if my mom came in with these symptoms, I would not want her treated like she's being treated in this emergency room or by people out in the field. I think everybody should be treated with dignity and respect, regardless. I'm not here to judge their life or anything about them. Nothing in my oath says I have the right to do that. It says I'm supposed to treat what's wrong with them and treat the whole patient. So that's just a stance I took. I also feel like over the years, you can try to train somebody what they should be doing. That if they are frustrated and suffering from secondary trauma because their job is really hard, they're not going to hear that lesson. They're not going to pick up that education whatsoever. They're going to fight you on it, whether they're a nurse in an emergency room or a firefighter or a police officer. But they do learn very well from modeling. And if they watch your actions on scene and they see that you have success with somebody that they have not had success with just because the tone of your voice is lower, or your words are not as harsh, or you hold their hand as they're waking up from an overdose, or you spend an extra 5 minutes with the parent of an adult child who is overdosed, and you show them how to do rescue breathing and what they can do to help their own child should they be in this situation again. Uh, that breaks down the stigma. And I think that's one thing that has been very successful in Huntington. The other part of that is, as a community, we were probably one of the first areas that really recognized and tried to help our first responders with what they were dealing with. I actually had a firefighter look at me with tears in his eyes one time and say, "You love addicts more than you love us, Chief." And it just broke my heart because it wasn't true. But, Huntington was getting a lot of attention because of the documentary. We never thought that would be any big deal, and it kind of blew up. But you know what? I can see that perception that, yes, I'm giving more attention to this subject versus taking care of them. We actually started a program for our first responders called Compass Navigating Wellness, and we have an embedded mental fitness coach and an embedded physical fitness coach. And we provide them with services, an outlet to make sure that mental health is not stigmatized for them and they have opportunities to seek out that assistance when needed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. By the way, that was my second question. So,
Sorry.
but in that question, now, did you face like any resistance? Convince your team that they need to take care of themselves, that it was not a weakness, or
Sure, there's plenty of resistance. Life is full of resistance. But I think we chose the right path. I
yeah.
stand by the decisions we made. Did we make some errors along the way? Absolutely. We learned some hard lessons, but in the end, I think that we've been able to be successful and save some lives.
Now, firefighters witness incredible trauma daily, especially during an overdose epidemic. And what signs should be looked at or that indicate that someone is struggling?
Well, anything from irritability, changing in sleep patterns, inability to sleep, relying more on alcohol. There's all kinds of things that we look for, and we're trying to normalize that it's okay to talk about your feelings. I was the only woman in my fire department most of my career, except the first year I was on the job. And it was great being a woman because I was allowed to cry. That you didn't see them crying, and they would always say, "I'll just suck it up." But that's very unhealthy.
Yeah. Now, as your role shifted from frontline response to policy development, what are your current priorities?
Well, we what we have on the front lines is an ever evolving um, epidemic. It goes from it evolves over time, and we have to make sure that policy is flexible, that it keeps up or is changed or modified when the conditions change on the front lines. We went from pills. The first couple generations of people suffering from substance use disorder were legally hooked on pills. They basically had normal lives, normal family lives, and then they became addicted. Then the pill mills got shut down, and we did a really good job of stopping the overprescribing. But we didn't deal with the addiction side, so people turned to heroin. Introducing it into the body with a needle, so that it invites bacteria and bloodborne pathogens into people, so their health starts to deteriorate. You have children that were born with neonatal abstinence syndrome or growing up with parents addicted or possibly in jail, or maybe they witnessed their parents die from an overdose. And so they did not have normalcy. So that's generation 3, 4. Maybe they had parents that had to leave apartments in the middle of the night with very little things because they were going to be evicted. And, so there's a lot of childhood trauma. And now we have adults with a lot of trauma. And so there's a lot of more mental illness. You have people that grew up not knowing normalcy, not, it's all about substance use disorder and craziness, not knowing how to maneuver uh, regularly within the world that we have. So the drugs went from heroin to fentanyl. Everything's polysynthetic now. It's fentanyl and methamphetamines and medetomidine and xylazine and all kinds of mixtures. Now we're having a little bit of cocaine come back, and we have little control over that. It's mostly cartel driven, but each change creates more of a challenge for our first responders and our medical system. And we have to make sure that policy is flexible in those changes and that we can build the programs that are necessary to address the changing needs.
Yeah, no, you're right. From when I started in 2000, like most people were coming to the center where I was working, and we could just get them off. But now they need medical detox, which before the most percentage of them didn't need it. So
And they have serious medical conditions like endocarditis. That's an expensive medical condition to maneuver. HIV is prevalent in IV drug users. Hepatitis C. So you have many things that deteriorate the body, which makes it all around more difficult to combat.
Yeah, it is. Now, many smaller or rural communities think this won't happen here. What would you want them to understand before it's too late?
I think that there's a lot of communities like Huntington out there that are willing to share ideas and things that work and things that don't work. What works in Huntington, West Virginia might not work in a small city in California. They might need different things, but I will say this: partnering with all the organizations in your area to combat it are key. Listening to people on the front lines, such as your health departments, your emergency rooms, talking to your police officers, your EMS workers, your firefighters. You pick up on little things before they become big things. So,
Yeah, that's a very good advice. Now, when it comes to prevention, what do you feel is most overlooked or delayed until after tragedy strikes?
I think that we need to spend more time with children and trying to teach them the skill sets that they need to deal with the trauma, like mindfulness, just basic coping skills. That's something that's really not historically been taught in schools, but that would be a starting point. Having social workers in all your schools, that's a very positive thing. Um, you can hopefully potentially deal with small problems before they become big problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, family are often afraid to act during emergencies. What would you want them to know when seconds truly matter?
Life and an overdose is a life and death situation, especially if an opiate or an opioid is involved. And so, not don't be afraid to keep naloxone on hand. Learn how to use it. I for some reason I think we should. I think naloxone should be free and it should be everywhere. You should have it on the street corners and vending machines. It should be pretty much free and everywhere. Because you can't. Once somebody is deceased, you've lost the opportunity. Even if somebody overdoses 30 or 40 times, every time you bring them back or revive them, that's another opportunity for them to make a different change in their life. And we don't know when that change is going to happen. It's up to them. But, I feel like we need to give everybody every opportunity to get through this.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I watch your documentary, and at some point you revive someone, and you know what you were talking earlier about really treat him as a human being and you know compassion and everything. I was really really impressed with that. Really.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's an overdose is it's a very negative event for not only the person that overdoses, because when we give them naloxone, we actually throw them into withdrawal. So we make them feel really bad. We save their life, but they feel really, really bad. And but they have big, sometimes muscular dudes standing over them, that they don't know. They're probably embarrassed. And they have a problem that they're struggling to deal with. Um, the last thing they need is a first responder saying, "What were you thinking? You could have died." That makes the situation worse. And then, they might be mouthy with us and then we get mouthy with them. So it's a very negative event. But I will say this, I think as a world, as a country, as a world, we need to talk more about the successes, because so many people do recover and they go on to lead exceptionally uh, wonderful lives, good tax-paying citizens, and they have a story to tell, and a lot of them go on to save many more lives. So, I think we're we're stuck in the doom and gloom a lot of times, but we need to celebrate all the successes that are out there, and there are many.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the guy in your documentary that you saved his life twice in a week and so on, that was something. Yeah, I was really, really touched with that. So,
Yeah, we're still good friends, and he's stumbled since then, and he's doing well now. But when you have a lot of childhood trauma, we don't know what each individual has experienced in their life, and they don't know what we have experienced in our lives as first responders. And here we clash. Here we come together in this emergency, and it's almost like it's a communication breakdown. And I think it's easy to fix when you think about it, but it's harder to put into action to fix that communication breakdown.
yeah, you are right. And also, I think it's persistence on both parts.
Hmm.
Like people
Absolutely.
around someone with a problem and the person that has the problem. So,
If I, as a first responder or a nurse, give up on somebody, what's that telling them? They're more apt to give up on themselves. But if I talk to them with dignity and respect and encourage them every time I see them without, hounding them, maybe they think, oh, she's nice to me. Maybe I do have some self-worth. Maybe that's what it takes.
yeah. Now, looking at where we are today, how do you feel the conversation around substance use has changed, and where is it still falling short?
I think we do quite well with substance use disorder. I think where we're falling short is in the mental health aspect. As as this epidemic has changed over the years, we have a lot more mental illness involvement, and I think that's where we really could make a difference if we changed that made some serious changes to the mental health system in the United States, that we could do better. Right now it seems like we're really good at getting somebody into treatment and getting them off the drug for the moment, but we haven't fixed that mental illness or addressed that mental illness properly with the same vigor that we put into the substance use disorder. And then it becomes a revolving door because the mental illness is there. There's not a lot of stability, and they go back to drugs and so on and so on, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Yeah, no. Now, do you think that, like when someone finish a treatment, also like if they go back to the same environment as they were, so probably the aftercare would be very important in that sense.
Yeah, I think aftercare, wraparound services, this is a lifetime disease that we need to, stay on top of, and make sure that the resources are there for individuals.
Yeah, it is necessary. Now, we run a successful education prevention program worldwide called SOUP, Substance Use Prevention Education. From your frontline experience, what prevention messages do you wish young people to know?
Um, I think we need to teach our young people that it's okay to say no to your friends when they offer you drugs. They're going to be surrounded by drugs. They're going to be offered all kinds of things. I think there's still a lot of peer pressure out there. I think, and not recognizing that has failed previous drug prevention programs in the past. But, I think we just need to be very realistic with kids. They're not stupid by any means.
They're not. No, they're
And
not. Really.
we need to be very real with them
Mm,
and give them as much information as possible. because they're going to be faced with it.
Yeah. That's interesting because when, I was in high school, this guy he came from prison and, like talked to us about drugs and really like it made us more curious than anything else. And with our program, that's one thing, exactly what you said. This is what it is. And like about peer pressure, we get like a full lesson on it and give them tools about peer pressure, what it is, and so on and so forth. And myself, I went into drugs when I was 15 because of peer pressure.
Mm,
So, but I would have definitely wanted these tools to not get
absolutely.
into it. So,
And yeah, just basic coping skills. Um, how to deal with stress. It's a lot of stress you're putting on somebody when you're pressuring them. Peers are pressuring them.
yeah.
You know.
Now, based on everything you've witnessed and learned, if you could implement one change nationally to address substance use disorder, what would it be?
Um, that harm reduction programs were everywhere, and there was no stigma associated with them. That'd probably be it.
Good answer. Good answer. Now, what moment or person had the most impact on you in the way you see addiction and recovery today?
Mm. I will say this: my friend Mickey, who was in the documentary, he really taught me a lot about addiction, and he's a very real person, and says it like it is. But I will say this, my mother, she's 90 years old. She's an amazing woman. And she was a special education teacher. And growing up, you know, she taught us to treat everybody with dignity and respect and to help those that cannot help themselves. And, so I would have to contribute most of how I act in this arena to my mother.
Now, if you had a moment with leaders who are still hesitant to act, what message would you want them to hear?
I would just probably stress the fact that people do recover and we need to destigmatize this. They, they would probably want their loved ones to be treated with dignity and respect regardless of what they were suffering from, whether it was a kidney stone or whether it was diabetes or whether it was substance use disorder or severe mental illness.
No, you're totally right. Now, to end, what would you tell family members who has a loved one addicted to drugs that can possibly create an overdose?
Mm. I would encourage them to become trained in use of naloxone, which is very simple. You can learn everywhere. You can learn it online. You can Google it and learn it. You can get free naloxone from many different areas. Most of your health departments throughout the country offer it for free. A lot of the opioid settlement dollars throughout the country are being utilized to buy naloxone or provide free naloxone. I would also encourage them to meet with local experts in substance use disorder to you know, get become more educated on what they can and cannot do for their adult child or their teenager or whatever. But I also would certainly encourage them to seek out mental health counseling because they're going to need it.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And also, I'm going to put on the transcript of the podcast. We got a page on how to use naloxone and places where you can find them in the United States and so on. So,
Wonderful.
John, thank you very much.
You're
That
very
was an
welcome.
honor to have you here. And
Well, it's an
we're going to
honor to be
use
here with you.
yeah, and we're going to use that podcast to to get people more aware of everything and give them tools so it saves life. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.